Over the last few months to years, sentiment around Call of Duty Warzone has been turbulent at best. Some love the new energy it's added to a fading relic, while others hate the mode, blaming it for taking focus away from what always made Call of Duty Call of Duty. It's now brought us to the question most of you all watching have probably asked yourself at some point. Did Warzone ruin Call of Duty? For one, Warzone pulled COD back from the brink. Following the crazy success of Black Ops 2 in 2012, Call of Duty really struggled to find its footing for the next few titles. The years that came after were filled with heavy experimentation and then later grasping at straws to try to stay relevant in the ever-changing FPS landscape. They tried genre hopping with Advanced Warfare, adding exosuits and sci-fi abilities like cloaking and double jumps. When the jetpack well was dry, they then tried taking the franchise back to World War II, also to mixed reception. Then they went to space, remade their golden goose, COD 4, and even tried copying Overwatch by making Black Ops 4 a hero shooter. Absolutely nothing was working for COD by the time Modern Warfare 2019 rolled around, which made some waves on its own, but it was nothing compared to the tsunami that hit when Warzone released at the peak of Battle Royale's popularity. And it didn't hurt that Warzone wasn't just another BR being added to the oversaturated market. They brought in the Gulag, a surefire way to keep players in the game and avoid situations where you're stuck spectating your teammates for 20 minutes because you were killed off the rip. Resurgence captured more of that classic COD fan base that loved nothing but action-packed gunfights and quick respawn. And loadouts perfectly blended that classic Call of Duty emphasis on class and weapon customization without hindering the in-match gameplay loop. These innovations on the formula brought an enormous crowd that Call of Duty hadn't seen in some time. Suddenly, everyone you knew was playing again and having a blast. They finally struck the goal they were after. But a lot of that was due to the second thing Warzone brought to this franchise, and that was the simple fact that it was free to play. Now, the yearly $60 price tag on Call of Duty was gone. This, combined with crossplay, made the game's only hurdle having enough hard drive space to fit this titan of a game. This enabling an entire new generation of COD players made up of old fans returning to their glory days, new BR players trying to get the hot new title, and everyday gamers looking for something to play in the midst of a pandemic. Everyone was back on COD thanks to Warzone. And the best part was that it was completely free. But being free has its drawbacks, mainly in the new monetization systems Activision had to employ. Yes, I'm talking about the store. While paid bundles and shady microtransactions existed for a while in COD, Warzone was where it just exploded, starting us down a slippery slope that eventually landed us here at $30 operator skins, purchasable self-revives, and just an overwhelming feeling that when we enter the game, we're not there to play, but to pay. And with Warzone's new audience came new competition. Fortnite, known for its over-the-top cartoony style and crazy crossovers, meant that if COD wanted to retain the audience, they would need to lean into these core pillars as well. Starting out subtle, like Rambo and John McClane running around Verdansk, Activision slowly increased the heat on these crossovers until we saw anime skins in a World War II game and superheroes were fighting Spawn and Santa Claus in Modern Warfare 2. Even ordinary operators were being given wackier and wackier outfits. Duck masks, zombies. Ghost has been turned into a parody at this point, with the amount of unrealistic and goofy skins they've released for him over the years. And this wasn't just for Warzone, because it was connected to the premium release every year. We saw these skins bleed into multiplayer and co-op, and before we knew it, the aesthetic of the game and COD's identity were gone. And in its place was this Frankenstein's monster of different styles being duct taped together by an overpriced storefront and battle pass. But like it or not, these systems helped pay for the next huge positive change Warzone helped popularize: free seasonal updates. With this model, every new piece of content was completely free for all. No season passes or loot boxes. The only thing reserved for the store were cosmetic items that wouldn't affect the core gameplay. And this included not only the free-to-play Warzone, but even the paid portions of the game, multiplayer and co-op. It might seem like ancient history now, but it was only in 2019 that they first adopted this free model. And like it or not, the reason they were able to make that shift permanently was due to the success of Warzone bringing in revenue through its storefront. In past years, for new maps, you would have to spend $15 per pack for usually 4 multiplayer maps, a zombies or co-op experience, and maybe a new weapon or 2. With 4 of those map packs a year, you would end up spending the same amount on DLC as you were on the actual game. And what if you didn't want a particular pack? Well, then you were fragmented out of the populated player pool. You were only matched up with other players who bought the exact same packs as you did, cutting the number of matches you could be placed in by a good amount, resulting in connection issues and problems playing with friends. This was also long before crossplay, so some of the less populated versions of the game, like PC back then, would be downright unplayable with how fragmented the player base had gotten. These updates also offer way more freedom to the devs on what exactly they put in these drops, because they don't need to worry about the game becoming pay to win. And instead of just maps and weapons in these drops, these seasons were able to expand to new game modes and features like new vehicles and equipment added throughout Vanguard, and the dozens of different zombies modes released during Cold War. But even free seasonal updates come at a price. Since their start, the devs decided to weave in a big interconnected narrative to go along with all this post-launch support as a way of tying it all back together. While not a bad idea on the surface, in practice, this just amounted to downright bad storytelling. Many of the post-launch storylines continue where the single player left off, which means that campaigns don't actually wrap up anymore because they need to hook players to keep them playing the live service. This is a big reason the last 2 Modern Warfare campaigns feel half-baked, with the characters and plot threads intentionally left open, leaving players unsatisfied. And the worst part is, they don't even close these threads in the post-launch seasons, and a lot of the times will just open up even more that don't go anywhere. Let's use Modern Warfare 2 as an example. Season 1 establishes troops on the ground of El Mazrah, setting the stage for Warzone that year, and introduces us to Zeus, someone who never comes up again and isn't even mentioned by anyone ever again. Season 2 was the Ashika Island update, so whatever story they began setting up in El Mazrah was abandoned. And now we're with Ronin, fighting Shadow Company without any reason given. Next, Season 3 has Valeria, a main villain of the campaign, escapes from prison, and it's up to Alejandro to track her down. Season 4 introduces the Connie group, attacking Vondel now and becoming another plot thread that never gets followed up. Even in the next game's campaign, almost none of these events are referenced, making them not even seem like they're in the same universe, despite the devs going out of their way to try setting COD up to be this MCU level interconnected world. Then there's the resurrections. In Modern Warfare 19, the campaign ends with Alex giving his life for the freedom fighters he's grown attached to. This sacrifice means so much to the characters and the story of that game. But shortly after Warzone's release, they simply bring him back with a blown off leg and play it off like it was nothing. The same thing happened again in Modern Warfare 2, where after Graves was killed in the campaign, they retconned it so he wasn't actually in the tank that exploded, so he could return in Warzone just to sell more skins. This just results in a complete loss in main character deaths, and them meaning nothing when they actually do happen. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised if they somehow brought back Soap from the dead just to be an operator in Modern Warfare 4. The interconnected story can be cool if it works, but it isn't all that necessary to a multiplayer game like COD. It's not all bad though. Cold War's post-launch story was actually pretty good, focusing on a new villain, Stitch, reprogramming Adler to do his bidding, with the maps and content each season tying directly into that story. In DLC 1, the Pines was the site of Stitch's first attack, where Adler is captured. Then, Season 2, the map Apocalypse featured the room where Adler was tortured and brainwashed, leading all the way to the final DLC, where we got to play inside of Adler's mind, where he and Stitch fight for control, all culminating in a satisfying and earned final cutscene where Adler finally kills him. Was it the best COD story ever told? No, but it was self-contained and it didn't step on anything established in the campaign. And that's what we should be striving for in these post-launch seasons. But getting back to what Warzone did right for the series, this new interconnected game also allows for an unprecedented level of evolution to the sandbox as the years continue. As each game releases and their weapons and mechanics are added in, Warzone becomes something of a melting pot. For instance, in Warzone right now, the map and the weapon pools are made from both Modern Warfare 2 and Modern Warfare 3. And while perks from MW2 are still there, they've overhauled the movement system with that of MW3, creating a nice middle ground between even just the two games so far on this engine. And in OG Warzone, we saw this constantly, even adding brand new features we never would have had if COD was only a multiplayer shooter, like planes, which they tried and ultimately failed to add back in World War II. But when it was Vanguard's turn to take over the map, Caldera introduced fighter planes that, while not the most practical, the satisfying controls and intense dogfights shook up the day-to-day gameplay a bit, and it felt fresh. Warzone would continue to be a testing ground for mechanics in the franchise, with classic limited time modes like Iron Trials, Payload, and Zombie Royale. They're always trying something new in the sandbox that they've created. I mean, even DMZ wouldn't exist without Warzone after all. The holiday events have grown significantly too since Warzone's been around. While some, like Krampus's Christmas mode, weren't too well received, others, like The Haunting, continues to improve year after year, introducing new map changes, operator and weapon packs, and even bosses found in the world this past year. These are the kind of things only possible in an open, evolving world like Warzone. The other side of that coin, though, is it's forced the rest of the game to stay rigid, because everything added to premium COD titles now has the expectation of being ported into Warzone. That means they need it all to fit in the same mold. Every new game needs to have the same gunsmith and weapon blueprint system. Battle passes became a must-have feature every season. And don't even think about stepping away from the operator system they've based their entire monetization model on. It's to the point where something like the jetpack era would never been able to happen because of these hard limits on what could be tweaked at the core of COD. Warzone is also, at its core, a battle royale, so everything is built off that same foundation. Meaning if you aren't a fan of standard BR elements like mid-air spawns, armor, and looting, then Warzone just isn't gonna appeal to you, no matter how many resources they throw at it. Even the UI has to stay the same, because despite the community's cries to split Warzone off into its own application back in the 2019 days, they did the exact opposite and made one unified Call of Duty launcher that all games need to coexist in, further removing any sense of individuality that these games had. And on top of this, while Warzone is given steady support by the devs, other modes are having to cut corners. Multiplayer is hit the heaviest. Looking back on MW2's release, many of the game's 6v6 maps, both on disc and DLC, were pulled straight from the Warzone map that year, and completely original maps were almost non-existent for months. A lot of players even look at the multiplayer as a ranking up simulator to get their guns maxed and bring into Warzone, which would explain the constant need for Shipment, Rust, or another tiny map 24/7 playlist to always be in rotation. Outside of 6v6, there was Ground War, whose gameplay has been barely iterated upon over the 3 whole entries, and has maps that are all straight copy and pasted from Warzone with little to no changes. Activision even having the gall to hold off on a lot of them on launch, only to release them later as new maps to pad their roadmaps. Gunfight, which was once the golden child of the rebooted franchise, has been stripped for parts, even releasing in Modern Warfare 3 with only 1 new map and carrying forward the 4 launch maps from the previous year. They couldn't even have ported over the lesser played DLC ones like Lounge or Kings Remastered, so it would feel at least a little fresh, right? This is all part of a continued trend of introducing a new mode, not giving it enough support to sustain a player base, and then abandoning it after a few months because there's no reason for players to play it. It happened with Champions Hill, Vanguard's Arms Race mode, Cold War's squad-based fire team, and the list goes on and on. Remember Spec Ops and MW2 and its one new map during the post-launch on top of an already bare bones offering on launch? The entire mode's progression was half-baked and largely forgotten about in all marketing material before the game had ever even been released. Even raids that seemed like they could be a great new addition to the co-op experience ultimately fell flat due to resources being routed to the free-to-play game and not to the paid experience. The content they do add is usually the same drip-fed old content too. Party modes like Gun Game, Infected, and All or Nothing often come after the game's launch, despite being staples of the franchise. At this point, roadmaps are filled with more returning content than actually new stuff for the series. They even axed the classic Prestige system in 2019 to accommodate the long-term progression of Warzone, bulldozing a lot of multiplayers' favorite aspects of the game that set it apart from other competitive shooters, and even recently had to delay the release of ranked play to work out some issues on Warzone's end. Then there's those limited time modes that would breathe so much life into Warzone, but doesn't extend out to the rest of the game. For instance, for the first Boys event, they added super powered field upgrades to the loot pool in Warzone. But in multiplayer, the only changes related to the event we got were the new skins that you had to pay for. And while MW3 is turning this around a bit with content and limited time modes coming to the paid game, like the second Boys event now getting its own multiplayer mode, it's hard to say if in the long run the trend will shift to be more equal between Warzone and multiplayer, or if we're about to plummet right back to Warzone first, multiplayer second, all over again. So there's every way that Warzone has impacted Call of Duty, both positively and negatively, which brings us to where we are now. Trends clearly show a long-standing pattern of Warzone being prioritized over multiplayer, single player, and other modes due to its higher volume of players and thus higher earning potential. And while Warzone offers a great playground to experiment with cross-title gameplay, it's mostly been underutilized in recent years, with most of the new modes being just different variants of BR, a genre that's been seeing a steady decline for years. But while Warzone may have been the cause of a lot of the franchise's current problems, it's easy to forget about the role it had in saving the series, bringing it back from the dark ages with free DLC for all, and putting Call of Duty back on the pedestal with the greats. And this loops us back around to the central question. Do you think Warzone ruined Call of Duty? Thank you all for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed and subscribe if you're new. We'll see you in the next one.